A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All,
the 2-year activity program of Pakhuis de Zwijger,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political, that we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
It takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
Hi everyone. You just watched the wrap-up of the first 2 years of Designing Cities for All, the program that took a deep dive into designing products, places and systems for all, as was mentioned in the video. And I'm really excited that we just embarked on a new journey 2 weeks ago. Part 2 to this, Designing Cities for All, Regeneration it's called. So in the next 2 years, we'll be exploring regenerative design together with 6 DCFA fellows and designers, storytellers, artists, of which we'll have one here as well tonight, researchers, experts, and it's a really wonderful conversation we're going to have tonight as well. My name is Lindsay, but I have the honor and the pleasure to guide the conversations here tonight and in the coming weeks. I want to say a warm welcome to each of you here. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for everyone watching from home or wherever you are. Really happy to welcome you into the conversation as well. And tonight we'll be exploring the bigger picture of regeneration. And it's the first episode in a series that we're doing with the first fellow of 2023. Her name, you see her behind me, her name is Sarah Ichioka. She is an urbanist. She's the co-author of this wonderful book here called Flourish. She's the founder of Desire Lines. And with her, we really want to go beyond what we think we know about regeneration. And tonight is about the bigger picture of regeneration. So we're going to really be zooming out, untangling different knowledge systems of things we think we know, and also going to several examples, regenerative practices from around the world. With 2 inspiring speakers here in the studio, one joining us from Suriname over Zoom, and a few interviews that I really am happy for you to become a part of as well. And we have a surprise artistic intermezzo, which I'm maybe most excited about of all. We welcome your participation. We're thinking together here. We're exploring together. If you're here in the room, just raise your hand if you have a question. We'll have a few question rounds. If you're at home, you can use the tool Mentimeter. For that, you go to menti.com You see the code behind me as well, 1140953. And I'll have your questions here with me. So welcome. Feeling good? Ready? Nice. Great. Okay, so we're going to kick off with a message by Sarah Ichioka, who I just introduced to you, for her to introduce today's theme in her own words.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you here. Happy Lunar New Year to anyone who's celebrating this month. After a short holiday break, Singapore, where I live, is unfortunately back to its regular cycle of demolishing and then reconstructing perfectly good buildings. So if you happen to hear background drilling or jackhammering, that's what it is. At the last event, I shared an overview of my key objectives for this fellowship. One of these is to explore the core principles by which we can define regenerative design and development. In my view, one of the fundamental characteristics that differentiates a regenerative design approach from older takes on, say, sustainability is an acknowledgement that we are not starting from a line of neutrality, nor should we be aiming towards one. Rather, those of us who are working in industrialized societies will start from an understanding that significant harms have already been inflicted to enable the systems we inhabit. If we understand this, really, truly understand and absorb this, we will design with a view to reparation, healing, and rebalancing, rather than perpetuate many inherited structures and relationships that no longer serve or never did serve the best interests of all. Let's aim to compost them and create fertilizer that amends the soil and enhances its diversity for the health of all. I also believe that a regenerative design approach is characterized by taking a wider view. This starts with us seeking to understand the systems and the mindsets we operate within. It continues with us embracing opportunities to engage complex issues, ranging from political change to ecosystem restoration to interpersonal dynamics, and so on. With this in mind, we've invited two special guests to join us today to help orientate us with their wider perspectives. First, I'll be speaking with Professor Jayati Ghosh. Ghosh is now Professor of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in the US, following decades of acclaimed work in India. She has authored or edited 20 books and more than 200 scholarly articles, including recent titles about COVID-19 and the economy and women workers in the informal economy. She has received several prizes, including the International Labor Organization's Decent Work Research Prize. She's advised governments in India and elsewhere, and served on the WHO Council on the Economics of Health for All and the UN Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism. Today, we'll hear from Professor Ghosh about Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity, which she recently co-authored for the Club of Rome. Then, we'll hear from Dr. Robert Gilman. Trained as an astrophysicist, Gilman decided in the mid-1970s that the stars could wait, but the planet couldn't. He thus turned his attention to sustainability, futures research, and strategies for positive cultural change. His on-the-ground efforts have included developing the Context Institute, co-founding the Global Eco-Village Network, citizen diplomacy with the former Soviet Union, serving as a city councilman in his local area, and working with the American Institute of Architects on issues regarding sustainability, or what I'd call regenerative approaches, and the built environment. Gilman currently leads the Bright Future Network and its Bright Future Now program, which will be the main focus of my conversation with him today. Although they're brief, I hope these two conversations will serve as really tasty food for thought. I hope that they will whet your appetite to learn more about these remarkable thinkers and doers, and will nourish your subsequent discussions. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for that message. She's not here live because she's based in Singapore, and it's late there. So thank you for being part of it like this. A couple of things that I want to capture from what she said that are really crucial or eye-opening to me. One, her point of that we're not starting from neutrality. The current systems that we inhabit are based on exploitation and significant harm that's been done. And in her words, what you just said, like design with a view to reparations, healing, and rebalancing. I think that's really crucial to hold on to in the conversation. And this wider view, of course, like the space in our own minds to think about these things in the coming evening. I would love, besides the guests that Sarah mentioned, we have a few of our own here in the studio, and I would love to invite my first guest, Joe Besselink. Give him a hand.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Joe. So happy to have you here.
Same. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I can't stop thinking about what you just told me. You just had a baby.
I know.
A week ago.
Oh, generating.
Congratulations.
Yes.
I'm such an honor that you stepped out of your baby bubble for a second to be here with us.
First time out.
Yeah. So, Joe, you are an urbanist, an educator. You're leading the Regenerative Cities program at Utrecht University. You're also the initiator of the Town Making Initiative. You do a lot. Now you're a father too.
Busy.
And you also launched a summer school recently. So we're going to hear about several of these initiatives that you co-founded or developed or shaped. But first of all, I mean, you teach a lot of people about regeneration or Why do you actually use regeneration or regenerativity?
I don't care.
You don't care. Okay. But how do you interpret that idea or that concept, and how do you teach that to people?
Yeah, that's an evening filling program.
Yes.
With a container concept this big, but so let's say all the theory and levels and scales aside, I guess it would come down to the art of coming down to earth, coming home to earth, becoming indigenous to our time and our place. Which means as much as living as if life of your grandchildren matters, as if life your life depends on it.
Coming home to earth.
Yeah, and so for us in this time that means also navigating like a dying of a cosmology, like the end of a time, the end of the world. I mean, it's the world has ended many times before for many other peoples, usually due to some modern mindset, so we can learn a lot from other peoples that have gone through this process already.
What do you mean by the end of the world in this case?
The end of the world is that the world as we know it, the world, life as we know it, a lot of life, most of life that we know is either extinct or being extinct in the coming years. And we are going through that process, and it is challenging our very identity as human beings on this planet, the way we look at the world, make things, learn, do science, everything else. So, yeah. So it's too big of a concept to just, go with like this. But maybe.
But you're doing a fantastic job.
And so it is.
Get to the essence of it.
So in this, you are trying to create conditions for life, to flourish, right? So this is, can we create those conditions? It's not just about making something sustainable but it is what can we do around it so that something can. So life gives life, right? Like a tree gives life to mosses and birds and insects. And so the question is, am I creating a home for other life?
Right. It's really about creating space, creating the conditions for life to flourish, and then just let life live. Yeah. I mean, maybe the easiest way to think about it is to shift your mindset from trying to solve things, from solutions, to sort of a mindset of cultivating, of growing things. Yeah, exactly. Interesting. And I mean, we can't disconnect it from, you know, like what Sarah mentioned about some of the broken systems. If we really zoom out and see the bigger picture, and her point of, you know, like not starting from neutrality, needing to heal, needing to rebalance. What do you think are some of the broken systems that you encounter in your work that we might not even be seeing? What's broken about them?
Yeah, so apart from, of course, all the obvious broken, I mean, actually, rather than being broken, I think the systems are doing perfectly well at what they're designed to, maybe a little bit too well. It's just that the need for those kinds of things is no longer, you know, it's no longer contemporary. So
the systems are
fine. The systems work really well. They work really hard to, in this modern sense of trying to control, exploit life, living in a dead universe. And it's doing that all really well. And then, of course, you see it as a consequence. It is the ultimate consequence of modernism, right? This is what we all wished for when we started, you know, the modern and Enlightenment, and this is the consequence.
Yeah, it's a nice reframe. The systems are not broken. Our goal is off.
Great. Yeah. And some of them can still be useful, but but if you look at what it's doing in the destruction of life and basically our souls, right? Because it's a deeper destruction. Then you know, from the bioindustry and the food and you know, the education as an industry, and then you know, I can go on and on. But the real system, I mean, I think it's a system of thought, right? That is, it's a system of connecting to life, and which is in a language of categories and abstraction. So that what's really broken is the way we live and see the world. That system of thought, that one is broken. Yeah. We've lost our connection.
And you're doing the work in your project and your activities in the programs you're teaching. Should we have a little look at a video that you brought?
Sure.
Of how you're mending this brokenness.
The summer school, The Regenerative City, is about seeing the land and the city as our curriculum, with the question, who do we need to become to regenerate this place?
What has this done for me? Yeah, it would be too easy to say this is a life-changing experience, but yeah, I mean, my perception has changed, definitely, from both the experience outside of myself and also within myself. My perception of the world has changed, and the way I view problems has changed.
And they made a story about this land, and they called it the West-As.
A bit cynical. That's just the way I am. I think I'm quite, yeah, I try to be pretty critical of things, and perhaps I've taken a bit of a step back this week and tried to really, yeah, step outside of my usual worldview and kind of allow myself to immerse in a different way of seeing things that maybe I'm not 100% comfortable with, or isn't super natural for me.
1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Thanks, Miguel, for the movie.
Oh, great. Thank you. Where can we sign up?
Yeah,
this looks fantastic.
It's crazy. Yeah. You know, I love my work.
Yeah. Can you maybe, as a closing question for now, give us a couple of examples that really, you know, that you take your students through, or that?
Yeah. So teaching for this is crazy. It's a crazy ride, right? Every radical pedagogy is a journey, you know, away from home and back home, and getting lost and refound. And so we've worked we're working in Sicily and here in Amsterdam in the West. And to give an example, so we take the land as our curriculum, right? Everything comes together. You know, the people, the plants, soil life, you know, whatever, culture, history, stories, the whole thing comes together. And we bring in ourselves, right? A lot of my students come in with climate depressions or with burnouts, or, you know, really trying to block out all all this stuff, because it's hard. And if you really let it come in, then you get destroyed, right? So how to deal with that? How do you navigate this? And by really engaging with a place and its people. And so in Sicily, we find the river and a river basin, the Asinara River Basin, as a containment for our class, basically. So it is rediscovering that river and its life-giving function, and which that entire region has lost. It's polluted, diverted, emptied out. There's no longer.
Where is this river?
This is in close to Noto, the Asinara River Basin, and it's a whole bioregion that we take as like a complex system, which is our playground, basically. And playground, I mean, it's real, you know, like lots of refugees, lots of, you know, degraded soil, conflicts. It's a mess, unemployment. So everything comes together. And by building a field of relationships and people, you know, from politics to farmers and schools and priests and, you know, the whole thing, we walk, and we discover the river together, we discover the place together, the culture, the stories, the histories, and find starting points of life. And so we discovered that the river was this potential binder of life. And so we've made, you know, festivals for the river together, and build a contract for the river and a park that restores the river and things like that, so that you know, the community can have also a new sort of a local economy around that river. So there's a lot of work that you do, but during that work, the essence is community. Essence is being in community, being in relationship together, and that is the healing aspect. So once you discover that you're not alone, once you discover that you have a place that you can be home in, can your class or your school be a home and not a stepping stone in your career, you know, then things become to have more meaning. And here in Amsterdam, so we're doing
this really sounds amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
River
We give
example.
place a voice. We'll be based here for the coming years. Yeah, so we're long term. It's not in and out. We'll be here and discovering and making this place more and more part of ourselves, and let ourselves be claimed by it. And I'm very much looking forward to how that's going to evolve. So place is central, and disruption of your personal identity, and you know, your how do you see yourself as a student or as a human being in the world changes over the course of a process like this, including mine. You know, doing this work is crazy sometimes. I can recount the amount of times that me and my colleagues were like, you know, facing our own painful realities, you know, to the point of tears or personal crises, and then you go like, oh man, why am I doing this? But
it's real work.
Yeah, it's real work. It's real work. So I'm inviting everybody is doing education or policymakers in this field and so forth, join and, like, you know, let's experience what this is and create conditions for regenerative education, because this work is necessary. You can't change the system from the outside and say, let's change that system over there. That's not happening.
You have to do the work yourself as well.
It's your work, yeah.
Wow, Joe. I'm so happy you're going to be joining us later on for the dialogue as well. For now, let's show him some love to Joe and his new baby and the baby's mama as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay. We're going to go to our next speaker, which is going to be in 2D again on the screen. It's an interview that Sarah mentioned with Robert Gilman, and Robert is an astrophysicist. He's the president of the Context Institute. He's the founder of the Bright Future Network, and Sarah indeed interviewed several really key thinkers in this area, and I'm excited to listen to her first conversation here.
Welcome, Dr. Robert Gilman, to Designing Cities for All. Before we dive into all the amazing things you have to share with us today, where are you joining us from and how are you feeling?
So I'm joining you from north of Seattle in Washington State on the west coast of the U.S. And I'm feeling pretty perky at this point. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm feeling perky too, because it's so wonderful to have this opportunity to reconnect with you. I had the pleasure of experiencing Robert's Bright Future Now program firsthand as a member of an early cohort several years ago. And I think I found you because I was studying intentional communities at the time. And this is, of course, a field in which you've played a leading role in previous stages of your rich and varied career journey. And Robert, what stayed with me most clearly from your teachings at that time was the message that in order to, in your words, midwife the tumultuous transition towards regenerative culture, that we need to work on ourselves internally and relationally, amongst other things. A key term on the network and program and in your thinking seems to be looking at everything as complex adaptive systems.
Right.
Could you share with us why is it important for cultural change agents, including the designers in the room, to adopt this systems view?
Well, we're in modernist culture, which is really birthed out of the Age of Enlightenment. The tendency was to try to model everything on a kind of mechanistic model, and we've got a lot of traction out of that. However, most of the interesting things in the world, especially today, don't fit that model very well. Ecological systems, for instance, the immune system, the way that economies work, all of these things aren't modeled well as machines. But what they are modeled well as is systems where you have a lot of semi-independent players who are all adjusting to each other, learning from each other, making changes. And this is what a complex adaptive system is. And so being able to take the learnings from, for instance, what's happened in biological evolution and apply that to cultural evolution, it's much more real. What can I say? The reason why we need to be able to do it is because it just fits better. It's a better model. And it gives us a lot of useful guidance as to where we need to put our energies. And it turns out that putting our energies into creating new patterns is actually one of the highest leverage things that people who want to move things forward can do.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the where we are that you've referred to in this transition from what you call the empire era to a planetary era? And what are a few examples of some of the things that are holding us back from smoothly accomplishing this transition?
Right. So let me just say that for me, the empire era is the agrarian empire era. Think Rome, think Babylon, think Imperial China, all of that stuff. It kind of started ending in Europe around the time of the Renaissance, but it was a slow process. But in the last 200 years, we've made enormous changes all over the world in terms of things like lifespan and literacy and, et cetera, and especially, obviously, technology. But where we haven't changed very much from those earlier patterns is that many people still behave as if they believe that the smart strategy for success is to be a dominator, to dominate over yourself. So use willpower for everything, to dominate over others and to dominate over nature. And in a highly interconnected world, and this is where the complex adaptive system stuff helps, in a highly interconnected world, that's no longer a smart strategy. The smart strategy is now to look for win-win-win. I win, you win, the system wins strategies. And we're starting to do that more, but we still have a lot to learn. But we're getting the world is getting a huge example of the contrast in what's happening in Ukraine right now, because the Russian system and the Russian military is totally based on a dominator structure. And the Ukrainian military, it's a military, but it's much more decentralized. There's an incredibly higher level of respect throughout the whole system. It's much more flexible and adaptable, and we're seeing the result. So is this, I really want to emphasize the point that in today's world, it's pursuing a win-win-win strategy for success isn't just nice, it's actually the smart strategy.
Can you give us a few key examples of what sort of skill cultural change agents need to learn in order to help move towards a win-win-win, the win-win-win scenario you talked about?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple that come to mind. One is, in a certain sense, really basic, but our culture doesn't teach it to us. And that is the ability to work collaboratively with your autonomic nervous system. And everybody carries a certain amount of trauma out of their childhood. And we're all carry these little landmines with us that get us triggered in one way or another. And when we get triggered, we don't have the skills to get ourselves back to a more balanced state. Well, with what's been learned in the last few decades, those skills are, really quite available, and they're not that hard. If more people were able to quickly get back from a triggered state, it would make an enormous difference in the way teams function, in the way individuals function. There's lots and lots of evidence that we're just more capable when we feel safe inside. And so that's one skill. Quite learnable, but it's just, and then another set of skills that I think that designers get a lot better than many people is that we've been in a culture that's pretty language heavy, and visual thinking, but also kinesthetic thinking, learning how to appropriately incorporate intuition. Anybody who's creative understands the value of sleeping on something and seeing what emerges in ways that are, it's not a rational process. This is what I like to describe as diverse modes of cognition, which is a kind of heavy term, but we need to become much more skillful at that. And if we can combine that with being savvy about our motivations and about those subconscious processes, then we free ourselves up as humans to be much more of our full capacity selves.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Robert, for that. I feel he said some immensely wise things, and just to pick a few, one is that we have to realize that the shift we're up against is very profound. Like when we moved out of being hunter-gatherers, really finding this new mode of being, these win-win-win strategies that Robert mentioned, and the skills that we need for that shift to becoming more savvy about ourselves, learn to collaborate with ourselves, with our own nervous systems, and one thing he said is, we make the old obsolete by designing the new. Like we make the old, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here in this fellowship as well. Design the new so that it exists. And I'm really happy to invite our next guest here, also to make it practical and really see like what can this look like. Yukiko Nezu, can I invite you? Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yukiko, you're an architect, a designer, a thinker, initiator. You initiated Urban Berry Design Studio, for instance, and you have a very intriguing project that you came to tell us about, the Shibara Waters project. Can you just briefly explain what that is?
Yeah. Shibara Water is a waterscape design thinking project in Tokyo about canals. So we have many canals, And Tokyo is a waterscape city, but because of also have a talk now, modernization, we forgot about the water nature. We built many roads on top of canals, so what we controlled water. Yeah, because Tokyo used to be 400 years ago started. It used to be Kyoto was the capital, but changed to Tokyo. It's called Edo. And Edo Castle is the center of Tokyo, and Tokyo Bay was just right next to it.
This is an old map that we're seeing.
Old map. So, Shogun create many canals and man-made water to distribute products, and also make the city growing. But now, after the modernization, the distribution changed to the road. And in a way, we have a very characteristic location in Tokyo Bay. We have many islands, archipelago almost. It's a rectangular shapes, and the canals are in between. Why? Because we get suns from the rivers coming from the high plateau, west side, and the east side is a lowland. So what this sand has to removed and create reclaim land. And that in the modernization, in the big world that terminals, like a container ship coming, that was not in Tokyo. It was in Yokohama. So here never came container ship, but still building those islands, continuing.
To serve for the container ships, but they're not there at all.
No,
it was not
no.
necessary.
So a concept of the making land since like Edo time, after Edo time continues. And the water is kind of at the backside, and the road is in the front, in between the island. So what it's a little bit ignoring and a little bit pity for that. And that this project is together with a Shibaura house located in Minato district. And I joined their project 2 years ago. They started about a water city, circular lab, and thinking and making workshop and debates and activity with all stakeholders, neighborhood, and I contribute donuts thinking to them together with the citizens. So what I wanted to join as a little bit more professional way to add on architecture perspective, because in Tokyo it's a little bit forgot the municipality to really draw the vision in the image. So what I thought would be nice with those people to collect all the ideas and the visions to make
for
as a visual,
as a water city.
Yeah, and to discuss and to share about the idea. Because if we build something, it is not only for us.
Also, the kids were sketching.
This actually I joined because Shibaura House made already many programs. So I want to grow more to meet more people and the expert and the company people. So
okay, so that's really how you went about your research for the projects. Involve many different voices, people inhabiting the city and what they think it could be.
Yeah, and the municipality also needs this voice because Tokyo has so big areas.
Yeah,
and the Tokyo Metropole governor is on top.
Right.
So this is only one part, but how really the user's voice can be picked up from it's bottom up and the
Is
top
Shiba
down
Inu
both.
also the name of the area?
Area,
yeah,
yes,
right. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly. And so what came out of it?
Yes.
Or is it still ongoing?
Yeah, it's just started to talk with an expert. What's the first question was, what's the good part of the water, or what part of water do you use water?
Do you use or like?
If no water, if put land, what's gonna happen?
Yeah,
almost like that, because there is pedestrians and the green and the things, but not so much used, or think like not a big way. It's just there.
Yeah.
So what can be nice to discuss, to think more.
It's really the relationship between the human and the water in the city, how they connect to each other.
But it is about also system. It's not about water system, but a more political system. Maybe at a more design code, or also how people connect, and that also how people live there, because the more than half of the people came here only for work,
right?
And they go. So who belongs to this place?
Yeah.
So what? All layers.
Yeah, many layers.
Yeah,
many layers that you are kind of making visible. The layers
to talk more loud with people, because it's a little bit difficult to open talk, to share also with a government level or citizen level or even kids. So try to make kind of platform to make possibilities, even also young designer, to make feasible study is not so common. So that's like missing a chance.
Yeah.
So
I have the same mats in my house. That's weird. Green things.
Yes, that's it global.
Globalization. What is maybe one thing that, as a closing question, maybe that you hope will come out of this?
Yeah.
What is your own hope?
Yeah. Now it's like the people to have a kind of a common understanding, common ground for the whole earth, because you can do something just next to you thing, then that's really connect to the world or to the to the earth to think, but to make a open mind and to share about it. That's it's good because the water is a binder.
Yes, it connects everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So, be like water, but in a new way.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And you're staying, but we would love to bring in our third speaker, actually, joining in from Suriname, beloved land of my father. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lisa Best is joining us here to speak about her PhD research and about several other projects, including Groen Paramaribo. But let's start, Lisa. Can you explain a little bit about what your PhD research is about and how it relates to regeneration, restoring ecosystems?
Yes. So my research is part of a larger project on agroforestry and serious themes by Wageningen University. And basically my research revolves around this nexus between forest, water, climate, and people. As you may know, forests play an important role in the water cycle. For example, when it rains, the forest facilitates the transmission of rain into water yield and stream flow. Or forests also help to recycle atmospheric moisture, which produces rain for continental areas. And of course, we may also know that forests help to protect coastal areas. And where the people factor in is that they both depend on the benefits of this interlinked system and they're affected by it, but they also make decisions which in turn affect the way that this nexus is functioning. And where I is on two areas in Suriname. One is in the interior. The picture you're seeing now is of the Upper Suriname rivershed. And this is where a lot of people depend on the forest for their daily needs, and they cultivate the land in a system that we call shifting cultivation. So this is one of the systems that I'm looking at, this shifting cultivation farming system and how it fits into this nexus. And the other landscape that I'm looking at is more in the urban context, at how green spaces affect the microclimate. And it's in these two landscapes where I try to how the nexus works on the one side, and the other side, I also, what I will do is to use serious games together with the people that are influencing and are affected by the system to explore these dynamics together with them. And I think when we're talking about regeneration and restoration, I think using this nexus approach really requires you to think in a holistic way and recognizing the interdependence between these systems. And ultimately, what we're aiming for is mutually beneficial outcomes, kind of like this win-win-win that Mr. Gilman was mentioning, not just by restoring these individual systems, but also the balance between them.
Yeah, so interesting. So where we were first talking about the connection humans and water, you're also adding forest as a third part in the nexus. Do you recognize anything about what Yukiko just shared about also kind of restoring that connection, or needing to restore the connection between people, water, and the forest, also in light of what Sarah started with, about, you know, we need to rebalance, we need to restore, we need to repair before we can do anything else?
Yeah, especially in the urban landscape. So I will tell a bit more about that later. When it comes to the interior in Suriname, this is where indigenous and tribal communities live, and they have a very different way of looking at the world around them and how they perceive nature. So there, of course, it's a bit of a challenge when you're talking about restoring a relationship, because these are often marginalized communities, and they do have certain rights to access to services and development in their own perspective. But I would say in the urban context, where we're dealing with modernization, urban sprawl, with more and more infrastructure, that's, I think, where we kind of need to restore our relationship with the natural environment.
Yeah, interesting. And if we maybe first a follow-up question on the rural or the forest side, because that's one thing that you started talking about, actually, these different knowledge systems and ways of looking at the world, right, or looking at nature. What have you encountered in that more Surinamese indigenous knowledge system that you think is really important for all of us to grasp?
Yeah, so what I mentioned about these indigenous and tribal communities, that their worldview differs very much from ours. They have this traditional knowledge which is passed down by their ancestors from over many generations. And they also have very specific, location-specific ecological knowledge that they gain by really living with and of the forest, basically. So when we ourselves think about nature or the forest in this case, we have a very modernized or even Western way of thinking. We think of nature as something that we can enjoy, to be at peace, and also something that we need to protect. But to these communities, it's really their home. It's their supermarket, their pharmacy. It's part of their identity as a people, and it also has a spiritual significance. So I think that's something that we can become more aware of, and be curious and open to learn. And also, of course, when working with them, be respectful of their perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And then lastly, for the urban side, the city, greening Paramaribo, the capital, as a case you are focusing on. Can you briefly describe what we can learn there from that example?
Yeah, so in Paramaribo, what I've been working on in the past 4 years is basically to look closer at why there are barely any public green spaces in Paramaribo. There isn't really a strong legal or policy basis, and what this conversation started is to really think about why are people underappreciating nature or a healthy living environment. So this is where a collaboration started between Compost Suriname, which is a local NGO where I worked, and also with University of Twente. And we really focused on research, but also engaging with stakeholders. And this was something that was very important throughout the project, to really build momentum and get people talking about this and try to understand from their perception what they think about green spaces and their living environment. Kind of like, I like the way that Yukiko mentioned how to involve everybody in thinking this their living environment. So I would say that's one of the main.
Yeah, really creating a vision that's ours, that's shared. Yeah. Thank you for now. We'll bring you back into the dialogue as well, Lisa. For now, are we ready for some arts? Yeah? Really? Are you awake? Yeah? Are you here? Okay, thank you. Let me introduce him to you. So we have in our midst here a very unique, very talented artist. He's a singer, he's a composer, he's a teacher, he's a creator of the human instruments method, which is a way to activate the inherent music that lives in each and every one of us. He has worked all around the world, from Carnegie Hall to the UN, with Sesame Street, Church of Climate Change, all kinds of universities, companies, TED, in prisons, in subways, at oceans, singing for whales, for dolphins. And it's a real honor that he's here to immerse us in his artistry. Nick Demaris, give him a hand.
Hi everyone. 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 So, my name is Nick Demaris, and it's very special for me to be here in Amsterdam and in the internet with all of you. And it's particularly special for me because when you said about belonging to a place, and you said about a place claiming you, these photos outside of this room are all photos of the New York City subway system, which, if I'm really honest, has a claim on me. It's where I started my artistic career after auditioning for Cirque du Soleil and them telling me, you have to go to the streets, you have to go to the streets to become great. And so right now you are not great. In fact, you are something else. We won't say it for the recording, but you are not great. But to become great, you go to the street. And I went to the street and I performed at the Metropolitan G stop, which there is a photo of outside of this room. It was very bizarre for me to see it. It's really as close to a home as I have anywhere in the world. So it's a real honor and a pleasure to be here today, to bridge the subway and the forest. This is probably a photo of a forest where I spent time, actually. There was a boy. There was a boy, a very strange enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one day, one magic day, he passed my way. And while we spoke of many things, from canals in Amsterdam to Tokyo, and and puppets from big ones to small ones, and Pinocchio, and different affectations of the universe. We talked it all, from big to small. While we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved. Is just to love and be loved. Is just to love and be loved. Just to love and be. Is just to love and be loved. Is just to love and be loved. Is just to love and be loved. Love. Love, 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 love. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved. The greatest thing you'll ever learn. The greatest thing I'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Thank you.
Nick Damaris, you magical creature. Thank you so much for that. Wow. How was that for you? Great. So beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm really honored. We have another interview after this. I'm like, why? Just love and be loved in return. We have another interview conducted by Sarah. And she already introduced it in the beginning with Jayati Ghosh, professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and the co-author of the book Earth for All. Let's have a look.
And welcome. So this very impactful report, Earth for All, has 6 co-authors, I believe. And because I think that collaboration is such an important topic for all of us to consider, I wondered if you could share with us a bit about what brought you to this work initially, and how was the writing process structured amongst the team?
Well, you know, this is actually an even bigger collaboration than just the 6 authors. This is a product of a commission that was set up by the Club of Rome. It's called the Commission, the Transformational Economics Commission. And it was designed to look back on the 50 years since the Club of Rome and say, well, where are we now? If you remember, they had a very influential report in 1972, which was called Limits to Growth. And that was a product also of a collaboration between scientists and social scientists. This was once again coming together of a range of natural scientists and social scientists and philosophers, and those who are basically thinking about, you know, the state of the world and the state of humanity and the state of the planet. And we were very fortunate to even have 2 of the people who were associated with the first report, Johan Rockström and Anders. So we were lucky that we were able to bring together people from very different backgrounds, people from very different locations, north, south, you know, all over, different kinds of men and women with different expertise. And as you can imagine, the commission itself, we had a number of discussions which were often very heated. We often had very different opinions about things, for example, the significance of population growth, or as a problem or not, and all kinds of other things. But I think there was a broad coherence and convergence about the fundamentals. And that's really what made this a very exciting and useful collaboration. So after a series of meetings, we decided that we do need to produce a report, which once again was based on scientific examination of the evidence and on projections for the future, the modeling exercise, which is an essential part of this. And so there was a very important modeling exercise conducted by the scientists, with some, shall we say, often very critical comments from us. This assumption is not wrong, that projection is not valid, and you know, all of that kind of thing, which then generated these different pathways. So we actually identified 5 different possible trajectories, and we decided, let's not complicate life, let's present 2. The best and the worst, if you like.
Yes. And before we dive into the business as usual scenario or the great transformation that you described, for those listeners who aren't familiar with the Limits to Growth report produced by some of your existing co-authors, Danila Meadows and others, could you just share a little bit more about what the key findings and social impacts of that report was, and then what's evolved in the intervening years?
So the Limits to Growth was, you know, hugely criticized at the time. People said it's so pessimistic, it doesn't account for human technology changes. basically, it argued that humanity cannot continue on a path which is obsessed with economic growth at all costs, that this will have extremely destructive impacts on our ecology, and that will come back to bite us, that will affect the growth process itself, and that will affect the human condition. Because it had a strong recognition of the impact on nature and the planet, it was very prescient. It actually recognized, even before global warming was a major issue, it recognized climate change as a possibility, but also many other sort of damaging impacts on nature, which we are now living with. So it was very heavily criticized at the time. People said it's overly pessimistic and doesn't account for all the human ingenuity that has always existed. But it turns out that, unfortunately, it was remarkably prescient.
One of the lines that really stood out to me in the introduction of the book is you write collectively, "It is possible, desirable, and even essential to be optimistic about our collective future." So with that frame, in Earth for All, your team have identified what you call 5 key turnarounds that we need to collectively undertake to achieve the target that you call global equity on a healthy planet. I know that our time together is limited, but would you be able to share with the audience the headlines of what these 5 key turnarounds are, please?
These are very big turnarounds, and they sound, almost transformative in themselves. But each of them, the first, reduce poverty. In fact, eliminate poverty. That's essential, because you cannot have anything resembling a just transition if you say, well, we're going to just save nature and the planet. We won't worry about humanity. We won't worry about the poorest half of the world. So removing poverty, absolutely essential. And we have a number of specific goals and strategies for each of them. Reducing inequality, which today has become beyond obscene and gets worse and worse every time we speak. Not only because it's good for itself and for social justice, but because it's very environmentally damaging. This inequality is leading to hugely excessive consumption of the rich in very, very destructive ways. The third thing is to empower women. And this has, in other words, it's also an aspect of inequality, but it's a slightly different one because it cross-cuts everything. And gender relations have been underpinning our particular pattern of capitalist accumulation, which, as I've noted, is extremely destructive. But it's also been something that, if you like, the suppression of women and the reliance on unpaid labor has been critical in everything that is going on in the world today. So we need to empower women in many different ways, not just through education, as it's always presented, but through income earning opportunities, through recognition of the unpaid work and reduction of it as far as possible, redistribution of it between society and individual households, and so on. The recognition of the importance of care work as such a huge, essential thing keeping societies going. Empowering women to have a voice in the things that affect them and in the ways in which we can make nature survive and the planet survive. So third big turnaround. Fourth is to transform our food systems. The global food system today is completely broken. It is unhealthy, it's environmentally damaging, it's extremely costly, and it's unnecessary. We have to go back to locally sustainable, locally viable, in harmony with nature types of food systems, which are also healthier for us. And finally, of course, we have to do the energy transition. We have to move away from using the dirtier forms of energy to green forms. So basically, one early version of this particular proposal was electrify everything. That is to move towards electricity-based transport and pretty much everything else, but electricity generated through renewable methods. It's doable now. The economics is actually viable. It's just that we have to create the systems that enable the upfront investment, provide the technology across the world, make sure everyone in the world has access to this, and we can do it. We can actually do all of these things. They were all done by humankind. We can undo the bad stuff and do the better stuff.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of the key messages of this program, Designing Cities for All. It's essentially that everything has been designed so that everything can be redesigned. And then you mentioned that you explore in the book 2 possible scenarios to try to illustrate more clearly the implications of continuing on the path, essentially business as usual, or what you call too little too late, or taking this great giant leap. Could you talk us through what that great giant leap looks like and what sort of time frame you articulate for it?
Well, we articulate a longer time frame than I think we should. We say, well, over the next few decades. But let's face it, we have to start right now. We really can't afford to sit back and say, as they are saying in the COPs, in 27 and so on, that we will do the following by 2050, which is ridiculous because none of the politicians making this promise is going to be around in 2050. We have to be saying we are going to do this year. In 2023, we are going to make the following changes. So I think the time frame is definitely, it's a medium-term frame, but we have to start right now. What do we have to do? We have to change the way in which we organize our global economy. We have to orient much more investment to what are global public goods and direct them to the kinds of things that I've been saying. Because, you can't reduce poverty. You cannot reduce inequality without significant public spending. So reducing poverty means investing in the places where the poor live, what the work that they do, and the activities they engage in, and the conditions under which they operate. That doesn't happen through markets. There's no incentive for private investors to go there and make commercial profits. We have to have public investment for that. Similarly, you have to reduce it. And ideally, we should be providing a minimum basic income to everyone on the planet. Again, doesn't come cheap. And a basic income also means the provision of universal basic services. It means access to food, nutrition, housing, health, education, sanitation for every citizen, regardless of where they live or who they are. And all of this means public resources. This feeds into the second part of reducing inequality. We have to do things that affect both the pre-distribution and redistribution of assets and incomes. Our regulatory processes today and our rules and frames and policies allow the rich to just keep getting richer and richer. We give them rents in all kinds of ways. The ones who already have power, they can extract monopoly profits out of knowledge by controlling patents, by controlling knowledge. They can extract money out of financial profits because they take fees, commissions, and surcharges on everything every human being does nowadays, even in terms of social services. We have to control that. So we have to limit their ability to extract profits from all human activity. And we have to tax the extremely wealthy and the extremely rich. That's an essential part. That's why, in fact, the members of the Commission have written a letter for the Davos meeting of the World Economic Forum, saying, tax the rich. If you want sustainable economic transformation, you have to tax the rich. All of you who gathered at Davos, you are the ones who can do this. Commit to taxing yourselves. You can, because you are gaining every year double of what you have gained over decades in the past. Some of that has to come back to society to enable these transformations. We have to pay for them. That's a way of reducing inequality. And there are other ways that we mention as well.
In conversation, Mike was a very powerful conversation. Thank you, Sarah, for that. And Professor Ghosh. Before I go into my next round of questions to our speakers, Joe, Yukiko, and Lisa online, do you have any questions? Either here or at home. I'll remind you of the way to ask your questions, menti.com, and then use the code 1140953. But for now, any questions here? To Cho, to Yukiko, to Lisa, to Nick? Yeah, the mic is coming your way.
Yeah, I have a question to Joe. I was curious of do you have some concrete examples of things that people started working on from the summer school or from other programs you've done that people started like initiating, creating something out there?
Yeah, I tried to. It was so fast, right? We had so little time. So a lot of things here in Amsterdam. We've been working on a regenerative development zone in the west, in the polders, and this is community-supported agriculture, sort of a stadslandgoed, like an estate, an urban estate that could sort of bridge the city with the land, because urban farming doesn't really work in an urban context. It's expensive and lots of other problems. But how can you make a model that sort of bridges these two, dwelling zones? And another one is like, how do you do that in common? How do you bring in a whole piece of land which is now owned partly privately, partly different kinds of governments and so forth? How can you govern that as a common and sort of steward it for future generations? Dive into that, both the management of it and the contractual work of it and so forth. And in Sicily, we've been working on this river very, very concretely. So building a river contract, a river park, changing education and research of the local university to really aim and the engineering and everything on that river, so there is local employment and knowledge to actually do something for the local, the community building around that, which right now is a flourishing community. It's crazy that last year they celebrated the river festival, because what is a Sicilian cooperative? It doesn't exist. It may exist in the north of Italy, but in the south, you have mafia and the church, and sorry, that's about it, right? I mean, I love Sicily, and it's not but like, how do you organize a cooperative structure there? You'd have to rethink, and festivals, we understand. And so that was sort of the basis on which a community and a field of intention could be built around that river and so forth, and the regeneration of, the land. So yeah, there's these kinds of initiatives are coming out, and that's it's crazy to think, because it's if you look at it from a distance, it's too complex, it's too big. All the problems in the world and globalization in one place. Where are you going to start? Everybody is depressed because everybody's going in a downward spiral and families falling apart. But you can start with this, meaning-giving story of that life-giving river, and community slowly sees, oh yeah, that's me, Oh, and you're here too. Maybe we can do something with that, bushes that grow next to it. Maybe we can do something with that, and people start adding and adding. Yeah, that's really nice. It grows. You can't just like, here's the solution. Now we've solved it. Now it's regenerative. That doesn't exist. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying. It's bullshit. Yeah. Right. It grows. It's very slow.
Grows. It's live. It's organic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Any other questions in the room? Or at home? Yeah.
I was wondering if anyone has an opinion on whether you think this community approach that is so necessary to kind of this new system that we need, that's adaptive and complex, whether that's possible in cities where you have so many people and communities start with everybody around you, but how do we scale that up, and is it possible to scale up?
Who would like to speak to that? Yeah, Yukiko?
I think it's really a network. Really, a dot has to be connected with the same sharing ideas. So even one small topic you want to solve, you cannot solve alone because of so many systems around. So you need another person to have the goal, can roll different attack for the for the something to solve. But this really a common ground to make, but really to create more people add on, then I have to make bigger. That's for the any levels possible. So
impossible to solve on your own, by yourself, without multiple perspectives.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, we will never have the kind of community that the First Nations have and things like that. We have lived in a totally different context, but we are still humans that can connect with other humans on another level than just, hey, you're a neighbor. Like, these relationships of trust that we need across, governments, citizens, farmers, different people that speak completely different languages, different backgrounds. That is work. And we can do that work in cities, anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions for you, all three of you, as well. Joe, let's continue with you, because a common thread that's been coming back is this, questioning dominant knowledge systems, basically, and there are so many others that we need to incorporate in here, right? And an important role is there, of course, for the educational institutions, because where do you get your dominant knowledge systems from? That's quite a crucial place. How do we change that? Maybe that's too big a question, but can you maybe share some examples from your own practice on how you kind of park the dominant knowledge systems and then bring in others?
Yeah, because I think like 12 years ago I was here as well with my students, and we were exploring the transformational potential of higher education and building more experimental spaces for relevant education that is both societally relevant and personally relevant. And now more of those spaces have emerged, but our surrounding context is still very much like a commodifying and exploitative context. You're not just going to change that. That's tough. What really, the only thing many interventions aside, there's a story that has to change. And first we need to invite other ways of knowing and other ways of other kinds of knowledge, right? And also specifically, the temple of universal knowledge, the university, has to become a little bit more humble and say, what is the value of the particular and the irreplaceable and the unique and the very personal and all those, and sort of accept the rhizomatic, chaotic reality of nature and life, and sort of really start to be respectful, but displace our own importance and start listening to the land. And by doing that, so I think changing it is bringing the land and the place into the university or in your school or in your system, and start listening to it and find ways of trying to listen to it, because obviously we don't speak nature. So that's a whole process for us to go. But that's, I think, to me, the biggest opener is put a place in the middle.
Right, make it concrete, grounded. Yeah,
grounded.
Lisa, hi. I wanted to ask you, one thing that we didn't really go into just now is your method of using serious games in your PhD research. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this? Also maybe as a way, building on what Che was saying, to learn in a new way or gain knowledge in a new way.
So serious games, it's, the name says it already, it's a game, but instead of a fun game like dominoes or Monopoly, even though dominoes can get quite serious on this side of the world, but it's a game which represents a system, a simplified version of a system. So, for example, this shifting cultivation farming system that I was talking about earlier, or it represents a concept such as trust. And the game is basically, it has a specific objective with rules for the players, but also rules about how the system that it represents functions. And there are feedbacks and there's interaction between the players. So basically the idea behind this tool is to stimulate learning, and we call it social learning because it happens in a setting with more people, and they learn from each other. There's cross-pollination, there's discussion, and together they explore these complexities and the systems and strategies for managing them.
So it's also in a way what Robert was talking about in the beginning, this kinesthetic learning by doing, basically, right? By experiencing.
Yes, and in a sense, a serious game is kind of creates like a safe environment because it's a fictional setting. So often in reality, you will have these power dynamics which are playing between different kind of actors. But within the game, it because it's a fictional setting and everybody has to play, and depending on the type of game you develop, people are playing in teams or as an individual. So it's much easier to interact and to engage for different persons.
Yeah, exactly. That's one way indeed to level the playing field and involve different stakeholders to really have a voice. Yukiko, you're doing that too. And maybe we can go into that a little bit more as well, because I feel this idea of kind of right relations is really important in everything that we're saying. Yeah. So relations with the water, the forest, with the land, but also very much between humans and the human connection. And what you just told us in Shibaura Waters, the project, you also work with so many different stakeholders that are normally maybe not heard. What is your advice in how we can bring that into our practice involving everyone? How do you do that effectively?
Yeah, that's I also have to learn. I'm just starting, but that I'm joining also as a volunteer in Amsterdam, in the New West and the West. So in being as a part of a citizen, as a local citizen, having everybody has a profession. So what I learned here, everybody can contribute your profession into your local location, only a little bit. Then why the city not for you? It's become really a home. So in that way, try to make a conversation as much as possible with the network, try to grow more.
Yeah.
And also this game, I'm also want to try, because that's actually nice to understand somebody else's positions.
Yeah. Instead of your own. Yeah, true.
And also that it's also at a game, it means more like a top-down people feels more easy to access, to try out together to other people. So that
requires also you yourself letting go of a certain role or certain standing.
Yes.
Yeah. Or certain ego, maybe. Yeah. And to each of you, we just saw the interview with Jayati Ghosh, where she speaks about different possible scenarios. The first one, which kind of brings us into depression mode, I guess, too little, too late, versus the giant leap, or that giant shift that has been coming back. I wonder to all three of you, what is your view on this? Like, what if we were to make that giant leap? I don't think any of us by ourselves has the answer to this question, right? Like how to make the giant leap. But what do you maybe think are the most important principles or the most important values that we need to hold on to be able to even think about that giant leap?
It's really intense, right?
Because
if you let this really come in, you destroy it. Yeah, you stay in a foolish position for a month at home. But I think what's worthwhile saving is still being born right now, and whether or not we go down with the great extinction event, either way, we'll have to do so in grace and together. With the ability to see beauty intact, because pressures were going to be, it's going to be higher and higher, and conflict will become more prone. And in the whole process of trying to save the world, we might actually, destroy what makes us human, right? So, the most important part is that can we, still, keep our soul alive in this whole process, because it is, it's soul wrenching.
What makes us human?
Right, good question. Right, so I think so. The ability to love, to see difference, to appreciate beauty, to have reverence. To see nature as sacred or each other as kin, and no matter on which side of the whole battle you are.
Interesting how we talk about that as what makes us human. Well, maybe that is what makes humans nature.
Hopefully. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, I mean, nature is also not always kind in that sense, right? But
no.
I mean, surrendering to that unpredictable chaos of nature, that humbleness in this whole journey, because we, this situation it doesn't have solutions. It's solutions that got us in this problem in the first place.
What we thought were solutions.
We are beyond solutions. It's not about solutions. We can maybe grow into a place that is more harmonious in some way or another. But
wait, let's unpack this for a second. We're beyond solutions. I think that's something we need to digest.
Did I? Okay.
No, as in we're beyond because we're all trying to come up with solutions still, even in the regenerative space, I would say.
Yeah, I don't believe that. So I think that they are the problem, right? Every problem we have is a result of a solution that we thought of in the past.
Wow.
And everything it's too complex, it's too dynamic, it's too alive, it's too rhizomatic to actually come up with a solution. This situation resists solutions.
So it's a way of being rather than
much more like that. Yes, it's a relationship, a way of being, a way of growing, a way of cultivating, and it's continuously going on without us having the overview and the control that we are so used to.
Yeah, and what makes us think we can come with solutions.
Hurts. Yeah, this is for us very humbling.
It is humbling, yeah. But also kind of liberating. We don't have to come up with solutions.
Yeah, after a while it gets liberating.
Yeah. Interesting. How about the others? Yukiko, Lisa.
Yeah, you became papa and you are mama. So I design and I draw single lines and other lines. But how long these lines remains in the future? I mean, like after 50 years, my grandchild may be saying, like, Mama, what did you do here? Yeah, so now really have to think future to design something.
Maybe they'll ask, what did you be instead of do? Maybe our grandchildren will be at a point where it's no longer about.
Sorry?
I'm still thinking about, it's getting really confusing. But if maybe it's not maybe our grandchildren or that generation will be at a point where they know that it's not so much about do something.
Who were you, grandmother?
Who were you? Who were you, grandma?
Yeah. Yeah. The part of nature.
A part of nature,
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Lisa, what do you think? What to you are some of those key values or key principles that we need to create the conditions for our giant leap, or maybe the giant leap that nature is trying to take?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you mentioned about humanity. That's essential. I mean, that's.
Can you repeat that? The sound.
Without that, I agree with too with what you mentioned about our humanity and our compassion. I think it will be very difficult to get to that giant leap without it. And then I also think that this recognizing this idea that it's one planet, one system of systems, and basically the health of the environment, it's our health. We're inextricably part of that system, and that's something that we need to really hold on to. It needs to become part of our DNA, so to speak. And another, when you mentioned in this confusion about the future and what we will be and how we will be, I think one of what I sometimes notice now is a bit of a disconnect between generations. We're talking so much about plans for the future and action and urgent things that need to be done. But in this whole discussion, I think the youth should be a lot more involved. and empowered to be able to participate and go along in decision making, to have a voice in decision making. So this intergenerational reconnection, it's also important, I think, when we talk about future.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. That's an important factor indeed that we have not heard yet. As a final question to all three of you, it's an open question really, because we're here to explore, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next few weeks, in the next 2 years even. Is there anything that you really want to give us to take along in our discussion, and how do we move forward in all that we're striving for?
Oh, there's so many things. But maybe a small thing that.
Okay, you can say up to 3 short things.
3 short things. So I'll say one short thing first, and this is comes back to this idea of control, and because the design has in itself sort of the tendency to, make whole, create, we determine the thing. So regenerative design is really interesting because it's sort of an internal tension between what you control and what you can't control. And so my mentor...
could they be even shorter?
Okay.
Is that difficult?
Yeah, I guess so. My mentor, Richard Sennett, told me the value of disorder and the things you can't control and leaving space for that, so that creates life. So whatever it is you're designing, and that the same counts for education and how you're making it with your students. Leave that emergence and disorder and create conditions for that.
That was one, or you summarized everything.
Yeah, I had
to. Great.
I had to be short, right?
Yeah, but I thought it was going to be 3 short things. That's why I cut you off a little bit.
Cool.
Okay, think about it. Yukiko.
I'll come back.
Yeah.
For the future.
Yeah. How do we move forward? How do we? Yeah. What do we take along?
Yeah. For my project, really have to create debates and.
Debate and conversation.
Yeah, and also how to say, lift up all different professions. And the cities are really not only for humans, of course, species. So other experts also has to talk about, and like music and poems. And words, this is really powerful.
Yeah.
And that's actually not so much common in Japan yet to use. So that's really
interesting.
Challenging. It would be very nice to describe in a live and to invite different type of generations and cultures.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Lisa, what is it for you? What's the one thing you want to give to us going forward?
I would say, basically try to stimulate as much as possible these kinds of conversations and really try, it links a bit to what you people were saying, but really try to cross disciplines, to reach out across disciplines, widen your perspective and encourage this cross-pollination. And maybe sometimes even as with serious games, to try and put yourself in a different role or try to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
In order to really find solutions.
Yeah.
Or
not to being, maybe. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, you formulated your thought. Okay, great.
Yes, so I have something that's of a slightly different order than I spoke about up till now. And I think it's really, really important to become experts in the hidden systems. Right, so the dark matter, as Indy used to say, behind the scenes, the things we don't see, the legal systems, the financial systems, all the nitty-gritty bureaucratic systems, we have to become wizards. If we want to change things, one part is great, we do the community work, we do the internal work, we train ourselves, but we have to understand this system in which we are living in order to compost it into a fertile soil. And that requires deep knowledge. And we have an aversion to deep knowledge, especially from these kinds of systems. So please don't think it is all right. It's like we can all have great community and be in the streets, but we need to have this under our belt.
Speak that language and understand. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, each of you. Yukiko, Joe, Lisa. This was a very rich conversation. We have a final recorded message for you from Jayati Ghosh and Robert Gilman.
Focusing more clearly on the people who will be in the room listening to our talk in Amsterdam. What implications can we draw from this report for the work of those who identify as designers or are perhaps clients or enthusiasts of design who want to also contribute to making this a great leap that you described possible?
You know, the beauty of this strategy is that in fact, you have to approach it at many different levels. It can't just be global. I've talked about the global, but it's down to the local. It can be and must be thought about at every different level. One of the members of our commission, Kate Rayworth, is the author of Donut Economics, which I think is also quite influential in Amsterdam. And she has shown how you can actually work with cities and in cities to transform the approach of that city to work within its own planetary boundaries and within its own social boundaries and in an equitable and just way. So we think that, in fact, these things that we've outlined are eminently relatable, even at local levels and certainly in cities. And remember, cities is where more than half of humanity lives. So we have to focus on that. So it's everything from how you design cities. How much commute is required for people's daily activities? Are you forcing them to move long distances? What kind of transport systems are you imagining in those cities? What is the nature of the electrification? How much can you do in terms of retrofitting existing residences to make them greener and viable and less energy using? How can you use the newer technologies, the smart technologies so-called, to create genuinely equitable smart cities? Not just these almost hallucinatory dreams of the very elite, but democratic spaces in which the public spaces are expanded, but also the access of ordinary people to different things is expanded in sustainable ways. So, in fact, cities and the design of cities is absolutely critical to all these transformations. This is Earth for All is a book, but we didn't want it to be just a book. We want it to be part of a movement. And I don't even want to say that we want to lead this movement. No, we want this to be a much broader global social movement because we need as many people as possible, not just involved or interested, but actively engaged in these transformations. And there could be others which are more locally relevant, other changes that are required, transformations that are required. But we want to be part of a bigger movement. And I really welcome this opportunity to engage with all of you because I think, we would be very happy to be part of your movement. And I think all of us have to work together because the changes are too big, too demanding, too challenging for us to try and do by ourselves.
Well, I think the thought that I want to share is I want to echo Bucky Fuller when he says that the only way to change something is to make it obsolete. And so that means creating something that will make it obsolete. And so I really encourage designers to take things to the next level. And even if what you're designing doesn't immediately appeal to the middle of the bureaucratic bell curve, don't worry about it. Get the examples out there. Show that it can work. That's what really drives the culture forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robert and Jayati. And Sarah. Okay, well, a quick recap to the extent possible with everything that's been discussed. This big picture of this regenerative shifts that we are in, actually. Let's believe that. We spoke about how it involves rebalancing, repair, healing, We spoke about how it might simply be coming home to earth, about creating conditions for a life to flourish and to live, and that notion that systems are actually not broken, they're functioning really well, but towards the wrong end, the wrong goal. We spend time speaking about creating right relations and you know, between people and water, between people, water, and forests, between people, and involving everyone in creating that vision, because none of us actually knows by ourselves what it should be. We spoke about the key turnarounds around eliminating poverty, distributing across gender lines, food systems, energy systems. We know what to do. We know what to do. But also at a more subtle level, the art and stories that that change us and that need change as well. Incorporating intuition, kinesthetic learning by doing, playing, and understanding ourselves in all of this. Who are we in all of this? And what could we be? And who could we maybe not be? We spoke about the end of solutions. And yeah, I do find it liberating. And rather, you know, focus on a way of being and embodying what we know is right. And that all maybe in a way comes down to just to love and be loved in return. Simple truth. And thank you for all for being a part of this beautiful conversation, for being here, for staying here with us. We're at the end of the first episode of this series, but it's just the beginning. In 2 weeks, we'll be back on the 10th of February with the next episode with Sarah Ichioka. I'm very excited about it. And then we'll zoom into the idea of stewardship. And also on the 24th of February, we're organizing an excursion to make it come to life with Upside Club Chico. So if you're a designer or a student or just someone else who wants to know about regenerative design, join us for free at that workshop and really get your hands dirty. And yeah, that will be with all kinds of workshops and learning about multiple regenerative philosophies. So it should definitely be interesting. As you know, all the programs in POCAS are always free and accessible for everyone. We want to definitely always keep it that way. To support that goal, you can also become a friend of POCAS Zwijger. For that, you can scan the QR code that you see behind me and on your screen, and you can think along about programming and, you know, all these conversations to be had. Thank you so much again for being a part of this. For more information about the whole program, Designing Cities for All, and to watch back episodes and also tonight's conversation, I think we need to replay it a couple of times. Go to dezwijger.nl/DCFA. Have a beautiful evening.